option that is open to us as the British government that we should definitely take. That's why my partner and I believe in the resolution that we should accept the peace treaty. So before I go on, I'd like to explain this resolution, offer the scenario that's been presented with it. The scenario is the following. The government team is Churchill's British unity government. It is late spring of 1941. Hitler's secret emissary has offered a peace treaty with Britain that will guarantee the territorial integrity of the British Empire. Churchill's intelligence network has learned that the motivation behind this offer is to facilitate a Nazi attack on the Soviets. Resolved, accept the peace treaty. So now that we've got that covered, I'd like to first touch on some resolutional analysis, explain this resolution a little bit more. We will be defining this as a policy resolution, specifically a situational one, so from here on out, we're going to give you some justifications to really show you why this decision is warranted. But before I go on, it's important to note that at this point in time, we are all pretending that we exist here. So you as the judge don't know what you know now about the outcomes of World War II. You don't have the biases you may have towards certain members of these parties. Instead, you are a citizen in 1941. You don't know anything past that point. So at this point, I'm going to start speaking in present tense, so be prepared for that. The first justification is self-protection. Now, we as the government team, as the British government, believe that the most important value that we can talk about is self-protection, is protecting our own citizens. We need to put the needs of our citizens before the need of anyone else. The resolutional situation specifically specifies that actually this is going to guarantee the territorial integrity of the British government. In other words, Britain is guaranteed safety if it accepts the peace treaty. This in and of itself is an advantageous justification for why we should go through with it. If we can guarantee the safety of our own people, we should definitely do so. Again, just to repeat myself, the needs and the interests of the British people should stand before the needs and interests of other nations as we represent the British people. So with that, let's move into a second justification, which can be written down as guaranteed safety. Now, this is similar to the first justification, but on a more national level. We're going to guarantee the safety of not only Britain, but all its territories, which means as a state, as a governing body, we have complete immunity. We have safety against all other parties, especially against the Nazi Party, meaning that we, as Britain, are untouchable by the Nazi Party if we go through this treaty. So let's get into the real meat of the arguments now, starting off with the third justification of Russian violations. Now, actually, Russia, at this point in time, has violated human rights more than Germany has. To give you some numbers to clarify that, Stalin, by 1933, had killed 20 million of his own people and 15 million from the Baltic states. That adds up to 35 million people killed by Stalin's regime. On the other hand, Hitler and the Nazi Party at this point have only killed around 1 million people. Not that we should be picking who's better than the other, but at this point in time, Stalin and the Russians are definitely the more dangerous opponents, and they have shown themselves as more willing to kill, which means we should at all costs destroy Russia before destroying the Nazis. Again, at this point in time, the Nazis have not proven that they are as dangerous a threat as the Russians. Now, this is important because if we want to pit ourselves against anyone, especially against communism, it's important that we look at really who on this scale is the most dangerous. As I've showed with these numbers, Russia currently is the most dangerous opponent. This brings us to the fourth justification, which can be written down as all scenarios win. Again, that's all scenarios win. Either outcome of this attack, the Nazis against the Soviets, any outcome is going to be profitable for us as Britain. At very most, maybe best case scenario, they both take each other completely out. However, even if that's just the best case scenario, every scenario under there is still profitable. They could just one destroy the other, they could weaken each other. At very least, we have a guarantee that both parties involved are going to be weaker after this war is over. So the Nazis are going to attack the Soviets, one of them is going to be weaker than the other. Either way, both will be weaker. Which leads us to the fifth justification of a stronger Britain. This is for many reasons. The first reason is because the other parties are weaker. The Nazis and the Soviets, regardless of the outcome of that battle, are going to be weaker, both of them, after this battle is done. On the other hand, Britain has time to fortify itself. Again, we are completely protected from the Nazi Party, not only Britain itself, but all of its territories. which means that we have complete safety against the Nazi Party. We stand against communism. We'd like to spread freedom rather than spreading communism. So really what we see if we go through with this is that one communist party is going to attack the other. We don't have to attack either. They're going to weaken themselves. While they are busy fighting amongst themselves, weakening each other, us as Britain, we're going to be on the back lines. We're going to be fortifying ourselves. After this is over, we're going to be much stronger proportionally than both of the other communist parties. Really, the intention of World War II, as far as the Allies side goes, is to stop the spread of communism and to stop the spread of these human rights violations. Both of those are accomplished without Britain ever setting foot on the battleground. Again, just to summarize, none of our soldiers have to get involved. None of our people have to get involved. We are completely safe. On the other hand, communism is getting weaker and weaker as both of those parties are battling it out amongst themselves. The biggest human rights violator, Stalin, is also growing weaker because although Hitler is also a human rights violator, we see him pitted against actually the worst human rights violator who has committed 35 times more human rights violations. In the end, there's every situation that is profitable for Britain. Britain is not touched at all. We don't even have to touch the battlefield. All our enemies are fighting against themselves. There's no reason not to accept that peace treaty. That's why we believe it's absolutely justified in our decision to accept that treaty. Thank you very much.
As our opponents have already explained, we're now in the middle of World War II, spring of 1941. We're currently under some attack from Germany, and Germany has offered a peace treaty under which we would not be required to fight against Germany. The only caveat, however, is that Nazi Germany would then therefore be allowed to attack the Soviet Union, thus rendering the Soviet Union essentially defeated. How do we know this? Because of Churchill's intelligence agency. The situation sounds pretty simple. When you first hear it, your first response is probably, absolutely, peace is obviously the best decision. However, there are a few historical details about 1941, particularly the spring of 1941, that we need to understand before we make a rash decision to simply accept whatever terms Hitler decides to offer. A few more details I'd like to present and the scenario of what Britain did know in 1941. First, Germany had a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union that began in 1939. At the time of 1941, the spring 1941, Britain already knew this, as did the rest of Europe. And what does this mean? Essentially, Britain is about to accept a treaty with a nation who is asking to be allowed to violate the treaty that they just established 2 years ago. Let me repeat that. Britain is about to accept a peace treaty under which they are promised that they won't be attacked, and this treaty is to be formed with a nation who is asking for permission to attack another nation that they have a treaty with already. This is the scenario that Great Britain is presented with. A second, another incident that you may be interested to know about is a speech that Hitler gave in January 1941, a couple of months before today. In this speech, Hitler simply stated that two things were his goal. First, the annihilation of the races in Europe not belonging to his. His goal was to completely annihilate Russia, enslaving or killing the entire population of Russia. His goal was also to annihilate the British Empire, according to this speech. Let me repeat that. His goal was to annihilate the entirety of the Russian population, either by enslaving or killing them, and also to take down the British Empire, a speech given 2 months before today. 2 to 3 months, give or take. Now that we know this, we know that we're about to accept a treaty with the man who is about to violate another treaty. We also know that we're about to accept a treaty with the man who clearly has goals of annihilating an ally and ourselves. Let's ask the question, is a treaty with this man really the best option? Let's look at a few justifications that our opponents brought forward. They essentially established the value or justification of the security of Great Britain, essentially. What this means is that they believe that Britain needs to self-protect itself. They need to choose whether to adopt the treaty or reject the treaty based upon what is going to happen to Britain. They said that essentially they can guarantee the security of Britain by accepting this treaty. My response to this is non-unique. They can guarantee the security of Great Britain at this time, and I'll be explaining in contentions how we can do this by not accepting the treaty. Interestingly enough, they cannot guarantee the safety of Great Britain if they accept the treaty. Why? Because they're about to accept a treaty that has no basis behind it. They're about to accept a treaty with a man whom they have no reason to trust. Hitler is about to attack a nation that he already has a treaty with, and now he wants one with you so that he can attack that nation. There is no reason to trust this man, nor is there any reason to believe that your government can guarantee your safety by making an alliance with this man. The second justification is guaranteed safety, not only for Britain but for all territories. My response again is this is simply not true. There's no reason why we should trust this man. There's no reason why your government can guarantee your safety by accepting a treaty with a man who clearly his goal is to annihilate you. This is not a man to be trusted, and this is not someone who we can trust to guarantee our safety. The third justification is the Russian violation of human rights. As I already stated, Hitler in his speech in January, 2 or 3 months ago, stated that his goal was to annihilate the entirety of the population of Russia, either by enslavement or killing off the population. So essentially what the government team is advocating is that we help Germany deal with a nation that is committing human rights violations by allowing Germany to commit genocide. Does that make sense? No, it should not. Let me repeat that. We're going to accept a treaty with a nation, Great Britain, or Germany that is, and the goal is to deal with Russian violation of human rights by allowing Germany to commit similar human rights violations against Russia. On a larger scale, annihilation and complete genocide. This makes no sense, and this is not a valid justification for accepting this treaty. Because if we accept this treaty, we are just as bad as Russia and Germany. We are no better than they. We're not upholding human rights in this situation. Final justification is all scenarios win. All scenarios win if Britain accepts the treaty. However, that's not true. And on that note, I'd like to flow back over to the opposition case and offer a couple of contentions. First contention is we have a desperate Germany. Germany at this time had not offered a treaty to anyone. They had told everyone, we're going to walk in, we're going to take over, there's not going to be a treaty. Czechoslovakia, Poland, Belgium, France had all been occupied, and there was no indication that Germany had any reason to give a treaty to any nation. If Germany does want a treaty at this point, that means that they're desperate and that they need us to ease up, and that essentially we are actually giving them some difficulty, or at least more difficulty than France, Czechoslovakia, and Poland could. The second contention, there are criteria. I believe there are a few criteria that we need to address. First is the advantage to be gained. There is no advantage to be gained by giving ourselves over to a treaty with Germany. All that's going to happen is we're going to weaken our own defenses by agreeing to peace with a nation that wants to annihilate us. There is no advantage to be gained by accepting this treaty. Second is a strong opponent. In order to accept a treaty, you need to feel that you are the weaker opponent and that you have some advantage, again, to be gained. Britain at this time is not the weaker opponent. They've already held off Germany for multiple years in the air raids. Not only that, Germany at this time is considered the weaker opponent because they're the ones that need oil resources. The reason that they want to take the Soviet Union or Russia at this time is because they need the oil and natural resources that the Soviet Union has to provide. Finally, trustworthy. Germany has a non-aggression pact with Russia, yet they want to violate that pact to establish a non-aggression pact with us. This makes no sense. Hitler is not trustworthy. In the event that we do accept this treaty with Germany, it is not a win-win scenario. It is a lose-lose scenario, because we're not going to be upholding human rights, as our opponents would have you believe, nor are we going to be protecting the security of our nation, because we are agreeing to peace with a man whose goal is our demise. This treaty is not a good idea, and for that reason, I would respectfully urge an opposition battle. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one important issue in today's debate that they have not addressed is that we're dealing with two irrational actors that are killing off their people, Russia and Germany. So England has the chance right now to sit back and watch our enemies self-destruct each other so that human rights violations can ultimately cease and desist by allowing our enemies to self-destruct, and then for Britain to be the stronger nation at the end. And they really did not refute this fact that Britain can come out on the strongest if we go with this treaty. So let's keep that in mind as we address their points. Now, one of the main ideas their whole philosophy is based around is that of the non-aggression pact with Russia, which is basically this idea of distrust that Germany might break the treaty later on, and therefore hurt our government later in the future. Now let's look to this, and I have two responses. My first is that of gain or no difference. Now let's look to the two options here if he breaks the treaty. Now, if he breaks the treaty, we're still at war with Germany, and therefore we're still losing men. Now, if he does keep the treaty, we'll be able to build up our nation and therefore fight Britain later on, and actually fight Germany or possibly Soviet Russia, and therefore we'll have a stronger edge. So either there's a breaking of a treaty and there's no difference, or we gain influence and actually have a stronger nation after the treaty. So therefore we need to go with the treaty so we have the possibility to have an influence, a stronger influence in this war, and to turn the tide in the war for our favor. Yes?
If we have a peace treaty with the aggressors in the World War II, the current World War, why is there a need to activate or boost our own defenses?
If we activate a treaty with Germany at this point, and as you say, they might break it in the future, then if we have this treaty in this time, we as the British government, we'll be able to build up our forces, focus our industries to build massive weapons, so that in the time when they do break the treaty, we actually have a stronger army, a more proficient army, that will actually be able to attack Germany in a more proficient manner than if we just attack them now. So if we accept a treaty, we can become stronger, and then ultimately affect a stronger nation, a less weak nation, because they'll ultimately be fighting Russia, and therefore losing more troops, strength, and resources, so therefore we overall will be the strongest nation. Therefore, in any scenario, it will be beneficial. My second response to this is that of time protection. So even if he does break the treaty later on, we do have this time protection, so all of our justifications still do apply. We will have self-protection for a period of time, we'll have guaranteed safety for a period of time, and there will be Russian violations that will actually be solved for because our enemies will be mutually destroying each other. So all of these justifications still come about, even if there's a time gap between this breaking of the treaty, because our justifications and our advantages still come about. It doesn't matter whether he breaks them, we're looking to whether he breaks them, and there are two different scenarios, and they're both beneficial. Yes?
Okay, quick question. Going back to the human rights violations being solved by allowing them to kill each other off, you're saying that allowing two nations and two races to annihilate each other solves the human rights violations? We're allowing their armies to combat each other, because if we allow their armies to combat each other, the two nations that are committing human rights violations will ultimately become weaker, which means that countries like our allies like America might be able to defend off and fight off later on with better ease, because now the two nations are weaker and they will not be able to actually succeed in any sort of war. So that's the whole point of the Russian violations and the German violations, is the only way to solve both is to let them destroy each other so that we can ultimately solve the issue, because the armies are really the big deal and they will destroy each other. Now let's move on to their idea of Hitler's speech. My response to this is self-protection. Now we're looking to a self-protection. Even if Hitler said that at a certain point he wants to destroy Britain, at this current time he's coming to us with a proposal saying that we will have self-protection. And even if we do not trust Hitler, and he will break this later on, we still will become stronger over a period of time, because we do have protection for a certain period of time. So we will be able to protect our citizens for several months, even possibly years, before there is actually any damage. So the only benefits that come in today's Vietnam is if we actually sit and stand by accepting a treaty. If you do not accept a treaty, we still go to war with Germany and possibly Russia in the future. We have no idea since this is 1941. So therefore, there's no reason to stick with a possibility which seems hopeless with a strong nation that is really looking to us and saying that we can actually have a possibility of escaping, and that's with accepting the treaty and becoming stronger. Now let's move on to the responses to the justifications. The response was basically to the first two of non-unique. My first response to this is scenario and goal of Russia. Now they're basically saying that this is non-unique because Germany wants to destroy everyone. Now if we move to the specific scenario, it says that we will actually, they're looking only to destroy Russia in this current scenario. They're saying that they're guaranteeing us protection and therefore only wanting to destroy Russia at that time. It's true they might want to attack us later on, but if you look to the justification, which they never actually address, of the stronger Britain, that is the whole point of this treaty. Even if they break it in the future, we have a weaker Germany and a weaker Russia, and therefore equating to a stronger Britain, meaning that we will turn the tides in the war and create a better outcome for all of our allies and for self-preservation and guaranteed safety. Now, my next response to this is only path to freedom. Now, the only team or government in today's Vietnam that is actually offering you a path to freedom and a path to safety is the side of the British unity government. Because the reason why is because they're basically let's sit here and fight Britain and Germany and see how long that lasts.
We, as the British Unity government, are taking an action and saying that the way to solve this problem is by accepting a treaty which will guarantee our safety for a period of time so that we can mutually destroy our enemies at the end and later on. That's the whole point, and they never address the idea and the actual justification of a stronger Britain in the end. Now let's move on to the next response of genocide for genocide. Basically, why do we let two opposing armies kill each other? Because that's essentially genocide. My response to this is self-protection. They never really address the issue of how we're guaranteed safety, even if it's for a small period of time. So we're protecting our citizens, which is a benefit. My second to this is self-destruction of enemies. We're not letting them necessarily destroy each other's peoples, but the whole point of of accepting the treaty is if they decide to attack Russia, the Russian army and Nazi army will be going at each other and trying to destroy each other, which means that mutually both of their armies will be weaker, which means that if Britain ever wants to engage them in the future, they will have less of a fight and therefore can have a stronger possibility of decreasing human rights violations. That's the only way that you can actually potentially decrease human rights violations with both nations, including Russia, which is the highest human rights violations. So therefore we need to look to the long-term goal of what's best for Britain, and accepting the treaty is clearly best. Now they basically had a couple next ideas of their own contentions. Their first contention was basically that Hitler is weak because he came to us with a treaty. My first response to this, and only response, is that of assumption. They're assuming that Hitler is coming to us because he's weak, and this is a really moot point which does not actually stand. Their next response is that of no advantage. And my response to this is to not address. They never address the fact that Britain, even in a small period of time, will become stronger and can self-preserve itself for time, meaning that we will be stronger and then we will be able to combat all future enemies in a more efficient manner in the future. They never really address the fact that we do have advantages. My second response to this is enemies equal weaker. The only way that you actually have a weaker enemy and two nations who have human rights violations will become weaker is if you accept a treaty. They never propose a counterplan or some sort of scenario where it possibly could decrease human rights violations for Russia and Germany. The only way that we can actually have an advantage is if we go with Germany. Even if they're not trustworthy, we can still have benefits, and the only scenario that is actually beneficial for the British Unity government is to accept the treaty. Thank you.
Judge ready? Yep. Timekeeper ready? The Beverly Hillbillies are nothing. Once they strike oil, they're something. Everything changes. And that's exactly what happens with Russia. If they get access to oil, or excuse me, Germany, if they get access to Russian oil, everything changes. And that's what's going to happen if we accept the government's proposal. If we accept the plan, indeed, Germany will have access to Russian oil, and thereby they can turn around and use that oil, which they're absolutely in need of, to attack the British Empire. And that's exactly what Hitler is planning on doing. Let's look at the flow, specifically addressing the points just brought up by the second government speaker. First is one of his main points, I think it was probably the main point of the speech, was the self-destruction argument, that Russia and Germany will self-destruct, thereby both will be weaker, ultimately human rights are advanced, also communism is kind of deterred, and ultimately Britain wins out. The problem here is actually that one of those two governments is going to win, right? It's clear that Russia's going to win or Germany's going to win. Once one of those parties wins, they automatically have an incredible amount of power. No longer do they have an opponent to stop them. At that point, Russia and Germany weren't exactly on the best of terms. Doing anything when it comes to military invasion, the other would have to look, or one would have to look at the other's point of view and say, hey, what is Germany going to do this about, or what is Russia going to do about this? Yes?
All wars lead to a depletion of some resources, correct?
That is correct. Okay. So, what's the deal here? No longer do they have that deterrent, no longer do they have that inherent opponent, and ultimately that opponent is nowhere to be found. They have a monopoly, essentially. Take it this way. Let's say Germany wins. No longer is Russia a factor. They're gone. They have Russian oil. They have the Russian landmass, which is incredible. And not only that, but they've terrorized all of Europe. Because not only they've taken over Czechoslovakia, France, and Poland, but they've also taken over one of the biggest empires in the world, and that's Russia. What if Russia wins? Well, now they have control over Germany, right? Germany is a non-factor. They can continue carrying out their human rights violations without any problem. Ultimately, this argument doesn't really work. Next, they said, well, okay, let's say Germany violates the treaty. We're still in the same spot because they can still attack Britain, but really there's no gain or difference. My response to this is, yes, there's a huge difference, and that's the shift in power and shift in resources. Because if Germany invades Russia, which if they adopt the treaty will happen, if Germany invades Russia, they will gain access to Russian oil. Right now, Germany, in the spring of 1941, is desperate. They are not able to really carry out a lot of invasions because they don't have the resources. They don't have the oil. But once they get that oil, they can, and they have the resources to deal with England. We can see through Hitler's speech to his own people that he is clearly planning an invasion on the British Empire. What he's telling his own people is very different what he would be telling the English Empire in this resolution, in this treaty. It's kind of like Iran. They tell the United States, we're going to reduce our nuclear weapons. And then they tell their own people, no, we're not. Hitler is going to tell the British government, we're not going to invade you. But what are they telling their own people? They're telling their people that Britain is the problem and that they want to destroy Britain. It's clear they're planning an invasion. The self-protection argument doesn't work. A couple of the reasons why you shouldn't adopt the treaty is really there's no need to worry about this in the sense that the United States can help Britain if indeed Nazi Germany invades. The United States is already providing aid through military arms, etc. So there's really no gain in trying to adopt this treaty. All you're doing is you're saying, well, we must play nice with Germany at this point. We have to agree to what they want to do at a certain level. We have to be their ally. That's a weakened position. It doesn't help. I'll take your question.
So we as the British government should rely solely on America to protect us in the future?
Not necessarily solely on America, but also there's other nations that would be involved as well. But the problem with this resolution and accepting the treaty is that if we say, okay, we're going to allow Germany to just take Russia, we have to play nice with Germany. We can't play hardball, right? Because we've already made an agreement with them. Let's deal with human rights. What they're saying is kind of illogical. The way to promote human rights is to destroy human rights. Because if they were saying, well, they'll self-destruct, ultimately Russia is the real harmful one. The problem here is that Germany is planning to take over Russia, not just take over and protect the civilians, but to make a tremendous genocide, slavery, imprisonment, concentration camps. That's not exactly protecting human rights, allowing that to happen. I don't really feel that you can take away or protect human rights by taking away human rights. It clearly doesn't work. So this argument falls flat. Let's see what they did not really go after in our case. First of all, they really didn't address the fact that Germany is desperate. They need oil, they need arms, they're running out of money. They really can't sustain the pace they're on. And we must remember that Germany, while they had a very modern part of their army, most of their army was really, really archaic. Horses, buggies, that kind of thing. Germany's not exactly strong. Also, let's look at the second contention. They really haven't proven that Germany is a strong opponent in the first place. They did not really deal with our second criteria, nor did they deal with our third criteria that Germany must be trustworthy. Under this treaty, we would be saying, we'll make a treaty with the government that they'll protect us when they're about to invade a country that they've just made a treaty to protect. Doesn't make sense. Germany is clearly not trustworthy, and that criteria doesn't work either. For all these reasons, I ask that you vote for the option. Thanks.
I love these name tags. Every tournament without fail. Very Okay. Are we all ready to begin?
Yeah.
All right. First of all, we must remember this is a scenario resolution. Okay? Our opponents have tried to make a couple of claims that I do feel we cannot accurately make with the knowledge that Great Britain currently has today. First of all, that being Russia is an enemy. Russia is an enemy. Now, the only thing that we actually know in this scenario is that Churchill has intelligence stating that Nazi wants to get rid of Germany, or at the very least attack Germany. We also know that Hitler gave a speech in which he stated that he wanted to annihilate both Russia and Great Britain. At no point up until this point in history today, has Russia ever given any indication that they intend to take over the entirety of Europe, especially Great Britain. Russia poses no direct threat to Great Britain today. There's absolutely no reason why we should simply forego our alliance with Russia. At this point, Russia is considered an ally. Russia is helping us to currently beat Germany. Together we have the upper hand, and to simply hand Russia over makes absolutely no sense. Now, the other thing they stated is that there are a few things we brought up that didn't feel that we could because it wasn't in the scenario resolution. Well, scenario resolutions do allow for historical context, and the speech that we provided is historical context cited in a book written by an author called Inside the Third Reich. This is historical context that can be provided in a scenario resolution. At this point in time, Great Britain does have knowledge that this is happening, or that Hitler has said these things. He wants to annihilate Russia first. When he's done with Russia, he's going to annihilate us. Now, the basic statement or thesis that they've been making is that we need to take the treaty now for a few months so that we can build up our defenses and be able to defend ourselves later. Take the treaty now so you can build up your own defenses and then take care of Germany later. They admitted that the only reason why we would take the treaty now is so that we could build up our own defenses and be prepared to deal with Germany later. They understand the fact that Germany is not someone to be trusted. There is going to come a time in the future when we're going to have to deal with Germany. Germany is going to attack. At some point, we're going to have to respond. So a few voting issues that they provided, I'd like to respond with a few voting issues of my own. The first one is no guarantee. There is no guarantee. They are telling you, Judge, that they can guarantee the safety of you as a British citizen and of all the territories and regions that Great Britain has, the land that Great Britain has. The problem is that they cannot guarantee this. Why? Because Great Britain is known to currently have everything that they need except oil to destroy Great Britain. If they get a hold of the oil, they get to destroy Great Britain. They cannot guarantee your safety because the only thing that can be guaranteed is if they get oil, Britain is in serious trouble and they no longer have Russia as an ally to help protect themselves. Second voting issue is no human rights. My partner alluded to this in his first speech. The idea of dealing with a human rights violation by allowing nations to commit human rights violations makes no sense. It is not logical. If you want to uphold human rights in the round, you must deal with them head on. If you know that Great Britain is about to become the victim of genocide, or that an ally is about to become the victim of a genocide, the correct response is not to allow the genocide to take place, but to do what you can to continue to stop it. Because please remember, Great Britain currently has the upper hand. If we take care of things now and continue to ally ourselves with Russia, who we do not see as an enemy at this point, we can take care of any potential genocide that would take place in the future. Third, nothing to gain. There is nothing to gain from accepting a treaty with Great Britain. At this current point in time, we have the upper hand. Yes, we are under attack, but we have weathered these attacks for multiple years at this point. Great Britain is safe because Germany needs oil, and as long as they have no oil, they cannot actually take over Great Britain. We have support. We have a strong ally in Russia who has not allowed Great Britain to be the sole focus of Germany's attacks. As long as Germany must still focus on Russia, Great Britain cannot be the sole focus and is not going to lose this battle as long as they have such allies. There is no reason to fear Russia's threat at this point, so there's nothing to gain by handing Russia over. Furthermore, we can best protect ourselves by working with Russia and rejecting the treaty. Remember, the ultimate point in the round is not human rights, but protecting ourselves. The ultimate value in the round as established by the government team is not human rights violations that Stalin may or may not be committing, but protecting the security of the British Empire. The only way we do that is we continue the fight that we're currently winning. If we accept a treaty, we allow ourselves to relax, and accept the possibility that genocide will occur not only in an allies nation, but on their own home front. We have nothing to gain from accepting these treaties. And for this reason, I would urge an opposition ballot. Thank you.
The government team has presented a huge contradiction. On the one hand, they've said that Germany's weak, they're desperate, they can't do anything. On the other hand, they've said that Germany is somehow strong enough that they're going to completely annihilate Russia, get all its oil, and then completely enslave all of Russia's people. Not taking a stance. We, as the government team, have taken a stance. Germany is a threat, but so is Russia. Something needs to be done about it. In this speech, I'd like to provide you with 3 voting issues, or 3 main overarching reasons why, at the end of this round, we believe that you should vote to accept this treaty. I'll be responding to the applicable arguments under the issue. So let's start off with the first voting issue of guaranteed protection. Now, to contrast these two teams, on our side, you have guarantees. On the opposition side, you have a lot of assumptions. Let me just bring you to one trail of assumptions. They assume that Hitler is going to break the treaty. They then assume that he's going to completely overtake Russia. They then assume that he's going to somehow still have enough resources to enslave everybody and then take over all the oil. This is a lot of assumptions. However, under any scenario presented, we as the government team still benefit. Let's pretend those assumptions are true. If Hitler actually does break the treaty, we still have a guaranteed amount of time before Hitler attacks Britain. Remember that Hitler is signing the treaty so that he can attack the Soviets, which means, at least for the short term, we have an allotted amount of time, which means our justifications still come about. We still get self-protection. Let's assume then that he completely enslaves Russia and he takes out all of them. Now we only actually have to fight against one actor and not 2. Let's assume that he then still has enough power to somehow completely enslave everybody. At that point, he's still going to be weaker. Britain, on the other hand, has spent a lot of time fortifying itself, building up its forces. Under any assumption, even the worst case scenario for us as the government team, we still have a profitable outcome. So let's look at the specific arguments. First, they said that actually they want to destroy Britain, so we should be wary of them. My response to this is guaranteed time. Again, the long-term goal of Hitler is to destroy Britain and some other nations. However, the short-term goal is to destroy the Soviet Union, which means we have an allotted amount of time where we're still protected. In any